when I was going back and finding the slides for this, I realized I originally did this for my colleagues at work in 2013, which is an awful long time ago, so I feel like I probably ought to have learned some more stuff about Vim in the interim. I'm not sure whether I have or not. So all the slides for this talk, of course, are projected from Vim. So I'm going to move to the next slide by just moving to the next buffer by typing :bn for next buffer. I think the first thing I need to tell you about is how to quit Vim, right? That's the... Getting into Vim can be quite easy and surprising, but getting out again can cause you some trouble. So don't panic. Hammer escape a few times to make sure you're in normal mode, and then you can type :Q ! And that will get you back out into whatever you were in before. I actually think this slide is slightly dated because in 2013 it was really quite easy to end up accidentally in Vim. These days it seems a little bit harder. Like Ubuntu stopped shipping Vim as the default editor. So you might end up in Nano, which is a lot easier to get out of than Vim. But anyway, if you find yourself in a window that looks something like this, press escape, type :Q! An exclamation mark, I've written here is not for emphasis, but it kind of is. It means do it even though there might be a warning. It means quit even though there might be something that you haven't saved yet. Yeah. Yeah, alternative way one of the many alternative ways of exiting Vim. Z, which means save and quit, I'm fairly sure, yeah. There are other ways of doing save and quit as well. And also, if you've ended up in Vim and there's multiple buffers open, this won't actually get you all the way out, but if you've got multiple buffers open, you probably, multiple windows open, you probably know what you're doing, maybe. :QA will get you out of, will close all the windows. And if you want to save, :W save, and there's a shortcut which is :WQ, which saves and quits. So I type :bn to move to the next slide. So now I'm going to type @:, which means repeat my last : command. But time for a quick interlude. Inspired by Hannah Dee's keynote yesterday, I started thinking about my identity and about risk-taking and stuff like that. So if you'll indulge me, I am at the intersection of certain kind of recognized identities, and I experience a lot of privilege because of some of those. Certainly true. But there are other aspects to my identity, and I started thinking about a bit about who I am. One thing that is a part of my identity is fear. Another thing is code and love of code. Another thing is God, whoever that might be, or whether or not that exists. And for most of us, people and the people that are in my life are a huge part of my identity. So that was just some random words I thought about my identity, so why am I making you read those? Well, fear, I mentioned fear. Fear is a huge part of my life. Because I'm doing a talk tomorrow, I didn't know I was going to do this talk, but I knew I was going to do a talk tomorrow. I've experienced a lot of fear, despite the fact that I've done it before. I've done talks like this at ACCU for the last few years. I don't know whether I still give that impression, but people used to say to me, how can you be so relaxed when you're doing talks? And I'm like, I'm succeeding in giving some kind of impression. Actually, for me, the fear is way worse in the months preceding than actually standing here. But anyway, I just want to tell you, if you were thinking, I couldn't do that, or how, then maybe you can. So that leads me on to, so the reason why this is inspired by what Hannah was talking about is, that led me on to thinking about taking risks. So yesterday or the day before, I volunteered to do this talk without much warning, which is sort of a risky thing to do. And volunteering to do the talk, I knew, because I've done it before. When January the 1st ticked round, I was going to be feeling that fear. And you know, I guess what I'm afraid of is sort of looking stupid or making a mistake and you thinking badly of me. So I could just not take that risk. So given that it clearly is kind of a risk for me, given the kind of physical response, why do I take that risk? Well, one of the reasons why I can take risks like that is probably because of those privileges. That makes it easier for me to do that. So just being aware of that. But really, this is all just set up for a confession. There's a reward in doing these things. The reason why I take the risk is because of the reward, and the reward is if someone thinks that I'm clever, then that silences the inner critic. And that leads me to the real confession, which is I was attracted to Vim because using it makes you look really clever. And that's stupid, but there it is. There's actually a much better reason to use Vim because it's really fun. It means that, so writing code for me was already fun, but writing a piece of prose was just awful. And when I started using Vim to write prose, suddenly it was like writing code, and it was fun. So yeah, that's a better reason. So confession time over. Here's what we're going to talk about in this talk. So this slide doesn't say Vim is a text editor, but anyway, Vim is a text editor. It's really, really fast. You can drive it entirely with the keyboard, but it's incredibly powerful. The depths of the power are, well, there's decades of learning in there. And not a lot of the power comes from the fact that it's programmable. And as I said, I just find it really fun. So I've already said I did :@, right, to move to the next, to repeat the last colon command. So now I'm going to do @@, which repeats the last command, which was :@, @:. So @@. What I should have done is put one of those things, the overlays that shows you what keys I'm pressing, but I'm not very technical. Yeah, Vim is really, really fast. Basically because it was written when you had to write code fast because you didn't have a lot of processing power. It's not as old as me, but Vim dates really from 1991, making it really, really old. And it's based on an editor called VI, which I don't know how old it is, but definitely older than me. 70-something. I was born in 77. People sometimes say that that's surprising. I look younger than that. Yeah, so because it's very old, a lot of bugs have been fixed. So it's pretty stable, doesn't crash very often. So it's fast. It's fast because almost everything you do happens almost immediately. It's very good at dealing with large files. Where it beats some other editors that are good at dealing with large files is that it also can deal with long lines. It's quite annoying to work with long lines, but it doesn't slow down Vim very much. And you can have lots of files. The thing that's a real selling point for me is that it's keyboard driven. And I'm actually running Vim in a standard terminal here. I've heard that more recently someone wrote something called gvim, which lets you use a windowing environment with Vim, but I would never use that. So there's two reasons why I don't use gvim, which, by the way, is not limited to sort of desktop environments beginning with G. It works on Windows and stuff like that. Two reasons why I don't use gvim. One, I find it really ugly. I find my default terminal, that I just love the fonts and the colors and it just looks nice. I don't like how gvim looks. But the other is that I wanted to teach myself to use the mouse less. It gives me pain to use the mouse. So I just kind of turned off the ability to use the mouse at all by running it in the keyboard, in the terminal. Not strictly true. I actually fairly often select and copy things with the mouse in my terminal and then paste them into Vim. So I cheat, but anyway. The way it works, the way it is able to be keyboard driven is there are keyboard shortcuts for a lot of things. But the kind of key thing is that there are multiple modes that it can operate in, so that sometimes your keys mean one thing and sometimes your keys mean another thing. And that's why it's confusing initially. Also, a lot of commands you just type in a command like similar to on the terminal, so that means there's a kind of large namespace of things you can do with the keyboard. And as a side effect of that, you can automate Vim by just playing back the keys you would press. And that is an absolute killer feature. Another reason to do everything with the keyboard, right? That then you just say to Vim, just do all these key presses. And that's not the disaster it would be in a kind of a graphical editor where things aren't in the place they were last time or things like that. Okay, so I said that the way it works is broken up into different modes. There's a mode that's charmingly called normal mode, which is only normal for Vim and slightly odd for anyone else. But basically, normal mode is for navigating around the screen. So we're in normal mode at the moment. There is also insert mode, which is for typing in text. And you can also do some other stuff in insert mode. And if you're a kind of Vim purist, that's kind of frowned on. I mean, I'm not a Vim purist, but I also try not to kind of go along with that sort of slightly macho culture. But yeah, the more you get into Vim, the more I at least found I wanted to get out of insert mode quickly, back into normal mode where you've got all the powerful stuff for moving around, and just use insert mode for just typing stuff in. You've also got visual mode, which I guess is a key part of the lack of a need for a mouse. So because you can select text by switching into visual mode and then navigating around with your keys and then copy it or whatever you want with it, that would be something you'd normally do with the mouse. There are some other modes as well. I don't know what they are. Well, we're going to talk about one of them, but there's some really obscure ones because a lot of them are compatible with VI and I don't know. Okay, so here's normal mode. So we're in normal mode at the moment. So in normal mode, you can move around using the arrow keys and pressing the arrow keys. But you shouldn't, according to some people. You should use HJKL because then apparently you can keep your fingers in the right typing position on the keyboard. I don't know about these things. Anyway, HJKL works, and that's incredibly useful when your terminal's got confused and the arrow keys don't work anymore, or you're on a keyboard that doesn't have arrow keys, or you'd like keeping your hand on in the right typing positions. It's also, by the way, really helpful to know a bit of Vim because these keys come up in other places. There's other tools that use, for example, HJKL to move around and stuff like that. Okay, so I've shown you me moving around with the keys, but that's the kind of slowest possible way to move around. And when you don't have a mouse to just click where you want to go, you have to kind of learn faster ways of getting around. So the basic things are I press W to move to the next word, like this. Actually, if you do Shift W, you move to the next word where word includes things that aren't normally part of words. So let me show you how that works. So when I press W, I move to just the bracket and then the or and then the H. But when I use Shift W, that whole bracket or gets treated as one word. So just one more Shift W moves me to the next place. So why would you bother learning the difference between W and capital W just so you can move like a little bit quicker in one situation? Well, the joy of Vim is that the knowledge you build up compounds. So that's not the only circumstance where knowing that Shift W means the whole word, including any symbols, is going to benefit you. So if you remember that, it's going to pay off in other places. Okay, so W goes to the next word, E to go to the end of maybe this word, maybe the next word, depending where you are. So I'm pressing E now. And you can probably guess what Shift E does. It goes to the end of the next word, including symbols and stuff like that. Other things that are really good for jumping around quickly, if you want to go to the empty line before where you are, you press curly bracket or curly brace, and you jump there. So if I do right curly brace, I'll jump to the next blank line further down. So it's like a really rough and ready way of going to maybe the next function or something like that. There's cleverer ways, but if you're navigating a piece of text with paragraphs, then you might well start using curly braces to move around. A few other things you're definitely going to need. GG goes just back to the beginning of the file, and Shift-G goes to the end of the file. Don't ask me why those things aren't symmetrical. G can do some other stuff as well. Other things, if you want to go to just the beginning of this line, you can do the caret symbol. If you want to go to column 0, you just press 0. So the caret will take me back to the beginning of the writing on this line. So that's quite a useful thing for flipping between them. You can also jump to, see if I can do this. You can jump to a matching bracket. So I just searched for open bracket then to jump back to that bracket. Now if I press %, I jump to the matching one. So that will work with like nested stuff. So you could go to the end of the function or this particular block that you're working with by jumping to the opposite curly brace. And in the past, people would talk about sort of hammering % as a kind of shorthand for trying to figure out what this function does, bouncing back and forth between the beginning and the end, which you can't do in Python. Nightmare. By the way, one of the customizations that I have on, which I would highly recommend, is by default, Vim highlights, as you can see, highlights the matching bracket, so you can see what you're going to jump to. But by default, Vim highlights it in a really confusing way, which means I never know where my cursor is, because it looks like another cursor. So I have a little customization in my RC file to make it a bit more subtle. You can see it's just gone a bit green. Yeah. Well, 1G, you then need some other stuff to happen. You need to press some other things, and I don't know what. If I press 1G, it's waiting for me to press something else. Right. Oh, right. Okay. What does it do in GVim? Oh, really? Right, yeah, so if I want to go to line 20, I can type just 20, colon 20, or line 10, colon 10. And if we do G5, 5G, enter. No, okay, I'm sorry, I don't know what's going on there. I don't know. But yeah, I think because the reason why it's GG is that you need G and then something else in this context. Ah, right, okay. Yeah, okay, so capital G takes me to the end. So you're saying if I do 5 capital G, fantastic. All right, okay, I've learned something, thank you. So that was 5 and then a capital G jumps to a particular line. And it looks like it didn't jump me to the beginning of the line, and I feel like maybe the other one does. So if I do colon 6, colon 7, no, okay, it doesn't. All right, ignore me. All right, sorry. Okay, so anyone else got any favorite moving commands before I move on? Oh, have I not put that? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so you press B to go back a word. Or obviously Shift-B to go back a word, including the symbols and treating the symbols as part of the word. And then the other thing you can do is repeat the last command by pressing dot. So if I type something in, if I could spell hello. No, yeah, clearly not. So that whole bit of typing was one thing that I did. So if I press dot now, it will redo that thing I did, which was typing hello. Oh, wow, that's really unhelpful. I've made some changes to this file, and I don't know what they were. So I'm going to do colon E exclamation mark to reload this file. And the exclamation mark means do it even though it's going to mess me up. Okay, so let's move on. So other things you can do in normal mode is you can search, which is a really good way of just jumping to where you want to be. So if I press / and then type a bit of the word, you can see it's highlighting, which is a non-default behavior, which slightly annoys me, but I have turned on. So I did /att to say search for the string att. Now I pressed enter, and it jumped me to the first match. And then I pressed N to move to the next match. If I want to go back to the previous, I can press Shift-N. That's how you jump around. You can also search backwards. So if I search backwards with a question mark and search for Pat, press enter, I'm now going backwards. And that means when I press N, I continue going backwards. And when I press Shift-N, I go forwards. So that makes sense when you get used to it. But yeah, which way you started your search controls which way you move. So now you can move around in normal mode in various different ways. There's lots of other cool ways of moving around. Sorry? Yeah, the search takes a regular expression. Obviously, being a regular expression, it's in a format that's slightly different from all other regular expressions. And in particular, it's kind of more optimized for jumping around text, which quite often could be code or something like that. So brackets don't have a special meaning when you're typing these regular expressions. If you want the special meaning of a bracket, you have to do / bracket. So stuff like that. But yeah, it is a regular expression, so you can put in a dot star or something like that, and that'll work. Okay, so other things you might want to do in normal mode. Well, I've already shown you might want to go into insert mode. So one way of going into insert mode is to press I. And you can see at the bottom it says insert now. So I know I'm in insert mode. And so now when I type things, instead of navigating or something else, they actually come out in the document. There's various other ways of going into insert mode, including if I press Shift-I, I go into insert mode, but at the beginning of the writing of this line, which is quite useful sometimes. And if I press Shift-A, I go into insert mode at the end of this line. And if I press A, it's subtly different from I go into insert mode after this character. So if that was me pressing little a, that went into insert mode, but now I'm typing after the N. If I go back to the N again and I press I go into insert mode before the N. So you only need to learn one of those, right? And then later you can fill in the other one when you see the need for it. Okay, other things you can do, delete a line. There's actually several ways of doing that, but DD will delete the line that I'm on. I just pressed U, by the way, to undo, which we'll see later. Also, you can indent the line that you're on by pressing right arrow, greater than. And now that I've done that, I can repeat it. So if I want to indent several times, I can just press dot to do it again. And if I want to dedent, I do left arrow, and then press dot to repeat it. So that works. If I want to change the case of a character, I can press tilde. And what that does is changes the case and moves to the next character. So I can just go through pressing tilde to change the case of all these things. Again, you kind of think, well, why would I bother learning this whole other bit of my brain for tilde changing the character, the case of one character? And the reason is because there's all these other contexts in which you're going to change the case of more than one character, and tilde is still going to be the answer then. So the knowledge you gain here is going to pay off. And we're actually already going to see some of the composability of commands with the next thing I'm going to show you. So if I want to delete, the reason why delete line is not just D, but DD, is because if you just press D, you can delete other stuff. So for example, if I want to delete everything up to the next word, I can use the thing I already learned about moving to the next word and combine it with D for deleting something. So if I want to delete up to the next word, I press D and then W to go to the next word. And the two things combined together, D for deleting, and then some kind of movement for what I want to delete. And again, if that feels a bit unnatural, I think it is. So I think the way into this is actually through visual mode, which we'll get to. So then if you select some stuff in visual mode and then press D, that feels much easier to remember than, oh, I have to do DW or D capital E or whatever I need to delete the specific stuff I need. So you'll get there though, because once D is in your head and the movement stuff's in your head, you'll be aware you can combine them. So the other thing you can do is not just delete something, but go into insert mode as well. So if you want to replace the end of the word delete with something, you can say you can say CE for delete and go into insert mode, and then the E means delete everything up to the end of this word. So CE was what I pressed, and I can change it to a different word. So that saves me one key press, but it's also like it's a conceptual thing that C is change this thing into some other stuff that I'm about to type. Something I use a lot is just replace a single character. So I don't have to bother going into insert mode and then doing backspace and then typing something. I just want to replace this A with a 4, so I just do R4. And now I can repeat that by pressing dot. So if I need some 4s somewhere else, I can just move around pressing dot everywhere I go. Any questions on that stuff? So, yeah, go on.
Do you use O?
Yes. So O goes to the next line and starts you in insert mode?
Yeah, opens a new line underneath the cover.
Right. Yeah. So if you press O, something you often want to do, right, is go to the next line and start typing.
And if you press P, it does it before 11. I can never remember which one's O and which one's P.
Open a new line under the new line previous.
So, you'll notice, by the way, another little thing that isn't on by default, but I have in my config file for Vim, is that any trailing white space is highlighted on the, in green just to make me delete it. And Vim's quite good at not leaving trailing white space around, actually. It's better than some editors. Okay, so then you can repeat stuff. So for example, if I used, I could use tilde to change the case of one character, but if I want to change the case of the next 4 characters, I press 4 and then tilde, and it does tilde 4 times. And now you can see why tilde moves on a character, right? Because now it's much more composable. Like that. Okay, so if you want to delete 10 lines, you can do 10 DD, and 10 lines go away. Pretty useful. And a lot of this stuff you can see, you would do it with a mouse, you wouldn't even think about it, but you'd be a lot less precise and it might hurt you. Why have I edited something? Okay, now last little bit, I think, of normal mode. And you've seen me doing this quite a lot already. To undo something is U. So if I made all of this stuff uppercase, I just did something you don't know how to do yet. But, if I made the whole of undo uppercase and I wanted to undo that, I would just press U. And then if I changed my mind, I'd press Control R. And there is like a stack of undos like you'd expect. And actually, if you set up your config right, stuff like that gets saved in a file, so next time you go in, it's still there. And we've already talked about dot to repeat. Any other favorite commands come to anyone's mind? Are there any questions about that stuff?
Oh, we've got S in here.
No, I never understand what S does. Can you help me?
Yeah, so search for in exactly the same way as you've done your search with your regular expression. And then you have another slash and then
Oh, colon S, sorry. Colon S is coming. There's something, just S in normal mode does, yeah. Just an S in normal mode does something mysterious. I don't know what. Okay, so the other thing you're going to need to do in a text editor is copying and pasting. So for example, if I move to this line and I press YY, you don't get any feedback, but it's copied that whole line. And then if you press P, you can paste it, or if you do 5P, you paste it 5 times. Notice, by the way, that when I undid, it undid all 5 of them, not just one of them. But also, as well as just copying a whole line, you can copy, say, 2 words. So the way you would do that would be Y for start copying, or yank is the word. And then if you do 2W, that will move you forward 2 words. So now I've copied the next 2 words. And if I do a P now, those 2 words are copied. Now in the background, that's copying into the default register. We'll talk about the fact that there are other registers. So you can have lots and lots of copy buffers for all kinds of stuff. Yeah, so I showed you just copying to the end of this word. You can also copy to the end of the line. So if I do Y and then $, which means move to the end of the line, which might be familiar from regular expressions, by the way. $, means the end of the line in a regular expression. So now I've got everything to the end of the line in my default register, so I can press P to paste it. And then, like many things, there's like a capital version, which is like an alternative version of P. So if I copy this line by pressing YY, and then I press Shift P, it pastes. Oh, you can't see the difference. It pastes before the line I'm on instead of after the line I'm on. So if I press just little p, it pastes after. If I press Shift P, it pastes before. So that's particularly useful for copying lines, but that's also true when you're pasting other stuff. It will paste like before where you are now or after where you are now. Any questions about that? Again, that is much easier to see what's going on and to think about when you use visual mode, which is like where you're selecting bits of text. So it should become easier to think about. All right, so we're done with normal mode. And we're on to insert mode. And insert mode contains a lot of mysteries for me because it strays into like control something keyboard shortcuts, which is just too difficult unless you're an Emacs user. But yeah, to get into insert mode, you press I or A or one of those other things that we've already talked about. So I press I and now I'm in insert mode. And so you can type stuff, but there's also a lot of magic you can do. One of my favorites is Control P, which means complete the word I'm typing. So if I type short, like shaw, and then I press Control P, there's only one other thing in this document that starts with those, well, only one other word in this document that starts with those letters, so it just completed it for me. If I do something that's going to have multiple completions, it's going to offer me what I might have wanted to type. So Control P is like IntelliSense without having to like compile all your code and stuff. It's just like most of the words you want to type, you've already typed before, and Control P just gives them to you. You can set up like proper code completion, refactoring, code navigation, and stuff like that in Vim, and I do use it, and it is excellent. But often Control P is actually a quicker way of getting what you want. This is a place where I have learned a few things since I wrote these slides. So I've got a couple of other fun insert mode things. Anyone got any insert mode tips? Control N is like the opposite of Control P, right? It's just like go to the... for some reason, I learned Control P. And I think Control P finds like the first occurrence before now and offers to complete it. And Control N finds the first occurrence after now, I think. Yeah. So yeah, you can use Control N and you'll get almost the same thing that I get with my Control P. I like Control XF. Whoops, Control X, Control F, which completes on names of files in this directory. Like, that's incredibly useful when you're, for example, if you're writing some HTML and you want an image, you just Control X, Control F, and the path of the image relative to this, relative to the current directory will be completed. I also like Control R, which lets you paste in the contents of a register. So that might be, if it was the default register, you press quote, because that's how you talk about the default register. But one that I really like is %, which is the path of the current file. The % register always has the path of the current file in it. Anyway, Control R will just paste in Control R, and then you say what register, we'll paste in the contents of that register.
My fingers remember, I'm not sure. My Shift J.
What does Shift J do? Well, in insert mode, or not in insert mode, that would write a J, right?
Is that yeah, sorry.
In normal mode.
Yeah, in normal. Can I add Shift J to normal?
Yeah, what does Shift J do?
Join lines again.
Oh, of course, yeah, I know that. I knew that. Yeah. Joining lines. Yeah, I do a lot of joining lines. So let's think about that. So let's switch back to normal mode for a second. If you're on a line and you want the next line and this line to be joined together, you do Shift J, and they get joined together. And it normally puts a space between them, except in some situations where you might not want it to, like if there's a bracket or something. Quite often it does the right thing, and quite often I'm deleting that extra space. There's a few other different join line commands that I don't know that probably do what I want. That'll be my research. Thank you. Okay, so that was insert mode. Now let's talk about visual mode, which is where some of this stuff kind of pays off. So I'm in normal mode at the moment. If I want to go into visual mode, I would press V. So let's go somewhere, and then I press V. And now I'm selecting text instead of just moving around. So when I use the arrow keys to move, I'm selecting, and I can go down to here, and I'm selecting stuff, and that works pretty much how if you clicked and dragged in most text editors works. So now I've got some stuff selected, I want to do something with it, which I'll show you in a minute. But there's other modes of selection. For example, I select whole lines a lot. So if I do Shift V, I've now selected the whole line, and now if I move up and down, I can select more stuff. And this can be combined with, like with %, for example. So you might select the whole line and then do a % to jump to the matching curly bracket, and you've selected all the lines in your function or something, or in your if or whatever. So all the movement commands are available to you while you're doing this. So yeah, V to just select normally, Shift V to select whole lines, and then Control V for the awesome rectangular select. Now I know a lot of editors do this these days, but it is great. So now I can press D to delete all that whole rectangle of stuff. And all the other things that we've learned. So yeah, let me show you. I don't know whether I've got this later or not, but if I select a rectangle and then I press C, what does C mean? Well, C means delete everything and go into insert mode. So I can type some stuff and leave insert mode by pressing escape, and a whole rectangle gets populated with that stuff. Obviously, you can do that in other editors, but you've been able to do this since about 1970 in VI. What else did I have here? Yeah, so yeah, this is exactly what I was saying. So that C is something you learn from like the normal mode stuff, but now you can apply it in visual mode. Okay, and then the last mode that we've got to talk about is command line mode, which is basically where you can just type in commands into your editor and it does it. So you just type : to enter command line mode, and then you can search and replace. So if we wanted to search and replace for save and replace it with good, we type in that. If you want to search, you want to find all the occurrences, even if they're all on the same line as each other, you can add a G, which means don't just do the first one on each line, but do all of them. And I've missed out a bit, so I need to go back and do this in the right place. So what :S means is do it just on this line. So let's do that again. So :S means search and replace on this line. So if I press enter, save will become good. I've got some kind of weird previewing mode on that means you saw that before I pressed enter, but it hadn't actually applied. I apologize for my non-default Vim config, everyone. If you want to do that to all the lines, then a lot of these commands, you can take a % at the beginning, which means, or some other stuff, but % means all the lines, and there's other ways of saying just some of the lines. And then you can do exactly the same thing. I've probably got this later, and I'm probably messing it up. So now it did it on all the lines of the file, which you couldn't see because I was on the relevant line already. So if I go to a different line, press the up arrow to go back to my previous command line mode command, just like in the terminal, and then press enter. It searches and replaces for all the occurrences of that in this file on all the lines. Any questions on the search and replace stuff? That was just a bit confusing, I think, on that.
Can I just add for the gentleman who asked about regexes? So yes, you can have your regex in there.
Yeah.
And then use matches from that in one place.
Yes, you can use regular expressions. So we could say any word that starts, any sequence of text that starts with an S and ends with an E, for example, should become goo, and it'll do all of them. Yes? Does it support different flavors of regex? No, it supports its own flavor of regex and no other flavors. But it supports running any command over your file in a really simple and easy way. So if you love Perl regular expressions, you just run Perl over your whole file, which I might have. If I don't have it later, remind me and I'll try and remember how to do it. Okay, so if you want to save, it's :W. If you want to save into a different place, it's :W and then the name of the file you want to save. If you want to save into a different place and be editing that new place, it's :save as, which presumably came along later because there's a lot of letters in that. If you want to open a file, it's :E and then the name of the file to open. If you want to show which files you have open, you do :ls. And you can see behind the scenes of this presentation how creatively I named my slides. If you want to go to the next file, it's bn, which we've seen already. If you want to go to the previous, it's :bp. Goes to the previous one, :bn to go to the next one. As we've already seen, if you want to jump to a particular line, you can do :3, and it jumps to line number 3. If you want to quit, it's :q, which we saw at the beginning. Any questions on that stuff? So we are just scratching the surface of what you can do in Vim, and part of the joy of Vim is just how little you know. But you can do a whole load of other stuff. By the way, we're near the end of the official time, so if you want to go, feel absolutely free to go. But there's nothing after this, so I'm just going to wander on. If you want to split into different windows, you can do, well, I have a keyboard shortcut for it. But you can type :v split, I think, to split into 2 windows, or :split to split into horizontal windows. And you can have all combinations of these splits. No one is excited by this because your current editor before you move to Vim, it can do this stuff. But Vim could do it in 91. Well, I don't know. Well, Vim could do it a long time ago. Yeah, so other things. So yeah, that was splitting windows. There's also this whole other feature called tabs that I never use that is apparently really cool, which is I think groups of windows. Or maybe windows are groups of tabs, one or the other. There's also an interactive version of search and replace stuff. So it can ask you each time, do you want to replace this one? The next one, and a load of other stuff around that. There's all the stuff about registers that I briefly touched on. So if I want to copy, so I've just selected this whole word, which was VIW, by the way. So let me take a brief interlude onto that. V to go into visual mode, and then instead of just saying W to go select to the end of the word, IW means to select the whole of this word. Or IP means select the whole of this paragraph. So VIP would select the whole paragraph. But yeah, what I was saying was, if you want to copy something but not store it in the default register, but store it in one of your other buffers, you can say double quote and then F for the name of the buffer. Hang on, I've done that wrong. So VIW, select the word, and then Y for yank, and then, no, that wasn't it. Double quote F to name the buffer, and then Y for what I want to do. So double quote to say I'm going to talk about a register, F for the name of the register, and then Y to yank into that register. So now that word is not in my default buffer or register. If I press P, oh, I copied it earlier. Oh, that's really ruined my example. Let's copy something else. So now I've got markers in my default register, so I just press P then. If I want to paste from my F register, I say double quote F, P, and I've got that as well. So I've got a whole load of buffers. I don't necessarily expect you to remember what I just said, but there's a whole load of buffers, some of which are available in all of the, a whole load of registers, some of which are available in all the files you've got open, and some of which are only used in this file, stuff like that. There's also markers, so you can say, I want to remember this place in the file, and then I can jump to it later. There's all kinds of syntax highlighting. You can turn on line numbers. There's also all kinds of things like this. So there's relative line numbers. So instead of seeing the actual line numbers, you can have relative to where my cursor is, this is line -1. Or some people love that. There's like folding of code, which I never ever do because it covers up things that you should care about. All different types of syntax highlighting, loads and loads of other commands, and that's still just scratching the surface because you can write macros for Vim in a couple of different languages, one of which is the worst programming language ever written, which is called VimScript. There's over 4,000 plugins on vimscripts.org. There's loads all over the internet. And a good way to write macros is just to record what you did and then save it. Some examples of some plugins that we've got. Compiling in the background, syntax checking, list of all buffers. I have a plugin for like my file, the local file directory on the left there. It supports language server protocol, or at least NeoVim does, and there's some kind of support in Vim. Obviously, there's a competing fork of Vim, which I use, called NeoVim. It's lovely. And code completion and all that stuff, and loads of other stuff that I don't even know why that plugin exists, but it's probably just beyond me. So there's a whole universe of stuff to explore. You can imagine it's been around, what is that? Over 30 years, there's a lot of stuff. But more important than all of this is that Vim is just really fun to use. And that, my demonstration of why that's fun is because there is a game called Vim Golf, which you can find at vimgolf.com. And what it is it gives you a piece of text as at the beginning and then like an end state you want to get to. And the challenge is to press as few keys as possible to get from the beginning to the end. So I'm going to give you an example. So this is the beginning state. You've got a load of numbers that you've got in from somewhere. And this is the end state. So it's like quite a normal thing you might find yourself doing, and it's pretty laborious to do this in a sort of normal text editor. It's pretty laborious to do it in Vim unless you like really done your research. By the way, I just pressed Control-Carre to switch back to the buffer I was in previously. So what's happening here is that the 0.173 goes with the 0.985. So the first line here is the first like vertical pair here. So it's going to be annoying to do. So how do we get from that to that? From this to this? And I think when I did this presentation, I had like memorized my current best answer. But I'm not going to. That was a long time ago. But on vimgolf.com, you can see your best score. I think I have to come out of full screen to be able to see my always on top windows. So here's my current best score at this challenge. So let's see if I can type it in for you interactively, and I'll try and explain what the things do. So you might not be able to read that, I apologize, but I'll read it out. So Q means start recording a macro. So I'm going to press Q. Then the next Q means the name of the macro is Q. So it's quite common to just do QQ for like, I want to start recording a macro, don't care what the name is. So let's call it Q. So now I'm in macro recording mode, because I'm going to do something repeatedly. Now I'm going to go into insert mode, and I'm going to make a square bracket. I'm just going to type a square bracket. And then I'm going to press escape to come out of insert mode. And I'm going to press plus to move to the next line. So I could have used down arrow here, but plus moves me to the beginning of the next line. And then I'm going to press D, capital E, to delete up to the end of this word, including symbols. So that deleted that whole number. And when you delete, it also copies it into the default register. So now I've copied that second number that we want to go next to our first number. So now I'm going to press minus to go back to the previous line, beginning of the previous line. And then I'm going to press Shift E to jump to the end of a word including symbols. Then I'm going to press A to go into insert mode after my current position. And then comma to type a comma. And then space to type a space. Then Control R to start pasting the contents of a register. And I remember I copied that number into my register, so now I press double quotes to say the default register. And I'm pasting. So I could have come out of insert mode and then done a P to paste that, but I want to stay in insert mode, so I did Control R, quote. So now I can do my closing square bracket. And then I'm going to press Enter, which is what the CR, if you can read that, means. So you can see it's starting to look a little bit like the desired output now. Those first two numbers are looking right. So now I'm going to press Escape to come out of insert mode. And then I'm going to press Q to stop recording the macro. So now I've stopped recording the macro, and now I'm going to run the macro 15 times by typing 15 for 15, and then @ to say redo something. And the thing that I want to redo is the macro called Q, so I'll press Q, and it runs my macro 15 times. And I feel like maybe I've got the wrong number of numbers here. I'm not sure, let's carry on. Or maybe not, no, maybe not. So now I'm going to delete 2 lines. So I press 2 and then Shift D. That didn't work. Let's pretend that worked. So I deleted 2 lines. And then as mentioned earlier, to save and exit, I do Shift Z, which I won't actually do because we'll go out of it. So we have successfully transformed the first buffer into the second buffer in only 27 keystrokes. I don't think that's the winning, anywhere near the winning score. Actually, I may have my browser here. So the winning score is 26 at the moment. So probably when I did this, I probably copied from the winning score at the time. So that's probably why my entry is so high up the leaderboard. So that it does let you copy. It does let you see answers like a little bit above your own, so you can learn, but not too far. So that's all I've got for you. Thank you very much. Any favourite commands or questions about what we talked about?
Sorry, can I have one more start?
Yeah, let's go to the back first, and then we'll do.
Yes, sorry.
A couple of things that I like to set list, so you can see all the non-printing characters with
Set list.
SELI, and it shows you where all the
Ah, okay. Like this. Oops. Yeah. And that will show all the non-printing characters in this file. I mean, I'm in NeoVim with some. I may have messed some things up. I may have missed some. NeoVim is very, very compatible, but I may have messed some things up. Okay, so any kind of weird characters in your file, that's a really helpful hint. Thank you. I'll try and remember that. Especially, might have non-Unix. Yeah. And just different line endings and stuff like that. Gail, let's go.
Yeah, just star. Star in num.
So, what does star do?
That finds the next current software module.
Right, yeah. So, you highlight a word, and then you do star, and it searches that's not helpful because there's only one occurrence, but it searches within this document for that word that you're on.
Yeah, so for example, you've got a Python script where you've got a function and a form of function.
Yeah. So,
You find that you haven't actually called it, and that's why it's not working.
yeah. So again, just like Control P is like IntelliSense on steroids because it completes all words, not just the correct word. Star is like search for all references to this function on steroids because it won't just find this function, but other functions with the same name. Yeah, so there was something else.
Just a hint for you, maybe you mentioned something like this, changing side, CI ports, for example, when you are inside the list wherever inside the list and you want to change everything inside the ports, you press CI.
CI quote. Oh yeah, yeah. So
Everything inside the ports.
yes, so there's amazing stuff to do with. If you're inside some brackets, you can do CI bracket, and C means change, and then I means kind of inside this thing, and then bracket just means like inside this bracketed expression. So if you need to change the condition in your if, you just get yourself somewhere in the brackets and CI bracket, and then you can start typing, and so suddenly you start thinking of your editing as like a set of operations on a logical structure instead of just like individual characters. Yeah, so CI, stuff like that. There's also an incredible plugin, which even people who are really against plugins tend to install, which is called Vim Surround by Tim Pope, who makes these amazing plugins. And that lets you do amazing commands like change this quoted string into a string in HTML, in this HTML tag, or change this HTML tag to a different HTML tag. And it just, if you're inside the tag and you do the command, it changes like, it just finds the beginning and end of your tag and changes them to something else. It's totally cool. Any other favorite commands? Yeah. Oh, yeah, thanks, sorry. Apologies to the online people, I forgot to check. The question is from Jez. It says, is VimScript worse than Cell? That's an in-joke because Cell is a language that I wrote, which is it's definitely worse than VimScript, definitely. So I have to recant. VimScript is like a fairly bad language, but nothing like as bad as Cell. Yeah.
So you mentioned Vim as code navigation. How does that compare to, say, IntelliJ or
Yeah, so the question is, how does the code completion stuff like that compare with IntelliSense or one of the other navigation and refactoring? And so it used to be a bit of a mixed bag. And when I wrote this presentation, one of the bullet points I had was, you can use the Eclipse. In the background, you can be running the whole of Eclipse just so that you can do like Java refactorings and stuff inside your Vim, which is like having this enormous mountain, and then on the top there's this tiny little Vim process. And so things are much better than that now, because thanks to Microsoft, which is not something you'll hear me say very often, the language server protocol is around now. So most of the text editors will speak a common language to another process that's actually doing the clever stuff about your programming language. So at least where you have that available, which is, I think, available through plugins in Vim or semi-natively in NeoVim, you can talk to any kind of language server protocol process, and it can do all the stuff you would expect in something like IntelliJ or something. So I do Rust. I do Rust coding in NeoVim with the Rust language server sitting underneath, and I can navigate to all around my code base, do refactorings, and autocomplete and stuff like that. Just at the same level of quality of language support as in VS Code or one of the other editors. I wouldn't say the UI is at the same level of quality, but yeah.
Yeah, I've got a couple of reformatting things for code. So equals is really useful for sort of like indentation.
Equals.
Yeah.
I've never used this. What does equals?
So if you've got some code that's badly
Fantastic.
You always get it right, but if you've got your shift width set,
Right.
sets the right numbers on an expand tab to get spaces instead of tabs, which is a whole new war. I'm not going to but if you're not using spaces instead of tabs, you're in trouble. But equals will guess how it's supposed to be indented and then try and do it.
Right. So equals will take your code and try and guess the correct indentation. So I'm going to do it on this even though it's not code. So it kind of guessed that we should be aligned with the title here. That's awesome. Thank you.
And GQAP, which wraps things to the right line length. So if you've got
Yeah.
masses and text.
So is the AP for like the whole of this paragraph?
Yeah. And
So
then
GQAP,
GQAP, if you've got a massive text, like a line that just goes on and on, so just a capital J or that, sort of just to get one really long line.
so I've got myself a long line.
GQAP,
So I could do VAP to select the whole thing, and then GQ, and that will wrap it.
yeah,
Or I could do what you said, which is
GQAP.
GQAP, which again wraps it without having to do the selecting first. So I often find it, especially when I'm getting used to a command, I find it useful to do it in visual mode and then do it later. So yeah, it's GQ for, so that's an example of one of the things where you press G and then something else and it does something.
Yeah,
So G and then Q is reformat. And
and then AP is the paragraph.
yeah, AP means select that whole paragraph.
Equals and GQAP I use all the time.
That's awesome. And I think that GQ can be hooked up to the correct code formatting for your code. I'm not sure. So I was going to talk about how you could use Perl regular expressions. I'll probably get this wrong, but if I say %, and so that means do something to all the lines of this file, and then I say exclamation mark to say run a command, and the command I want to run is Perl, and then I don't know, what is it? Something like something like that, maybe, to tell Perl to run a regular expression over its input, and Perl minus E. Any advances on that? So if I run that, it doesn't work. So if I got the Perl command right, that would have run Perl over my whole file. So that's really useful for, like if I got some JSON, I'll just run JQ dot over it just to format it all, and just stuff like that. And if it doesn't work, let's try it. So by the way, you can see that I'm saying do it on all the lines here with %, but you can actually just do it on one little chunk. So if you've got some JSON inside some other code, you just select those lines and do : exclamation mark, and it will do it just to those lines. If I run this through JQ, then the output of that command becomes all those lines, right? Cool, I've probably bored you enough, but if you've got more favorite commands or questions, come and talk to me afterwards. But thank you very much.